Welcome to the Helping Hands Way, People, Lean, Strategy. This is a podcast for nonprofit leaders doing real work with real teams, real clients, and real constraints. I'm Doug Rawson, Executive Director at Helping Hands Aurelia. In each episode, we share one practical play, how we approached a challenge, what we tried, what changed, and what we learned. No theory for theory's sake. Every conversation includes a playbook drop, a tool, template, or checklist you can adapt in your organization. Real work, real wins, the NFP playbook.
All right. Good day, everyone. We're back for our next episode of our podcast. We have Kristen back with us again today. Kristen, maybe a quick little introduction for those that missed our last episode.
Awesome. Excited to be here. Director with Helping Hands, Quality, Performance, and Special Projects. Excited to talk about some of our lessons learned.
Amazing. And we're joined with Katrina. First time on our episode. Katrina, welcome. Maybe you can give us a little introduction about you and your background with Helping Hands.
Perfect. Thanks, Doug, for having me here today. I'm Katrina. I'm the Director of Finance, Business Intelligence, and Processes here at Helping Hands Aurelia. I've been with the organization for just over 4 years now, and I actually started here as the finance clerk.
Amazing. So today is all about our journey on quality. And we're going to talk about the importance of measuring, but really measuring with an intent to improve and not overwhelming systems and people. Because really, our last time was really talking about not overwhelming and having that burden of continuously measuring, but really, how do we use measuring to be meaningful? And we really want to relay and share some of our stories about how we've been able to improve. I think we have some examples that we can share. And I know Kristen and Katrina, we've done a lot of work at Helping Hands, and we've done a lot of work around quality and quality improvement, and really use that lens of lean and how we've been able to make micro steps. But I also don't want to lose focus that, in a day when people are overwhelmed and they're frustrated and they're struggling just to keep things done at the end of the day, people go home and the work doesn't finish at 4 o'clock. The work continues 4, 5, 6 o'clock, right to midnight onwards. But today we want to just focus on what kind of data did we use to really improve systems and processes? Kristen, from your lens, is there any projects or any things that you can kind of look back in time and go, here's something we measured and how it helped?
Yeah, there's been a number, as you mentioned. I tried to think back to what some of our early measurement trials were, because as we've spoken about before, we really had to bring the whole team along on this new journey. So one of the early projects that we worked on was really about measuring our staff time for outbound calls. So given the nature of our service, we would provide reminder calls to clients the day before. So a client has a transportation service booked at 2 o'clock. They'd receive a call the day before to remind them, make sure they had what they needed. We had the address correct, really just to try to avoid those last minute cancellations and reserve that capacity if we could redeploy staff. So we had administrative staff in our office providing reminder calls day before for a number of years. We started doing some quick math to add up how many staff. And we realized, at the end of the day, 2 o'clock would come around. We'd realize there were 4 sheets left and we'd start distributing them across the office to try to get those calls done. But we really didn't have a clear number or clear measurement to tell us how much administrative time was dedicated to that task. So one of the projects that we took on early was to have our receptionist staff, who were primarily charged with this task, start a check sheet, check off the phone calls, how much time did it take you? And what we were able to uncover was it was about 56 hours of administrative time every week to complete those phone calls. We recognized the importance of continuing those reminders, but really needed to look for a more impactful solution for those 56 hours. It's a lot of administrative time just to avoid a potential maybe 1, 2, 3 cancellations for the next day.
Great, Kristen. Appreciate you sharing that one. And the check sheets one we're going to share a little bit later. But, the importance that you identified there was just start somewhere, start measuring something. Then once you kind of get a good lay of the land, we can then make some assessments and termination. You make change. I'm sure you got more to share. Katrina, do you have any examples or story of something that you found that you're able to measure? And then we can look at how we're able to bring an improvement process forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So a situation that we were in was our accounts receivables were continuing to grow month after month, and we billed the month after for all of our billing. And at the beginning of the month, we had to send out all of our invoices. It kind of got to be a tense point in the office. Everyone would almost avoid each other because we were stuffing envelopes, printing hundreds of invoices, and mailing them out to clients. So essentially, what we thought was let's track how much time we're actually spending from processing the billing to printing the invoices to stamping every invoice and mailing it out, and see how much time it took our team, whether it was a leadership team or administrative team, and track how much that was actually costing us to evaluate options for outsourcing the sending of our billing. So through a couple months, we completed a PDSA cycle. We went back and forth and tracked all of that time that it took there down to walking to postage machine to, I don't know, filling the paper in the printer. And what we had determined was there was a couple $100 a month of administrative time that we were spending on just mailing our invoices. We reached out to a couple local vendors within the area, and they were able to quickly onboard us and send out our monthly billing for us and saved us quite a bit of administrative time within our office.
Okay, so both examples, the important thing was measuring current state. So let's not worry about how we fixed it and how we brought a new solution forward. It was really measuring current state because that really gives us a lay of the land about how we do things today and how, through the lens of looking to improve, we can find little opportunities for improvement. Kristen, can you just highlight while you were doing that assessment, what were you really finding and what were the real gaps and the opportunities to improve?
So we uncovered a lot of things, a lot of laps in process. So everybody completed the task a little bit differently was one early learning. Another was sort of the nature of the call or the need of the client on the other end of the call. We had a lot of advocacy from our staff to say, everybody needs that personal phone call. Everybody needs to have the touch base. But we also found on the other end that there were clients that we would call and leave messages for that couldn't access them or didn't understand the message and they would then call back. So lots of sort of process opportunities were uncovered. The other thing that we realized after the assessment was that those 56 hours really were needed for other tasks in the office. We learned from the staff that, in order to complete reminder calls, I put off internal online training or I put off other tasks that really might have had more value were being put off in the attempt to get through that call list. And it was an everyday occurrence. It started every day. And Fridays, particularly being difficult because all those weekend phone calls were done on Friday. So there was extra capacity brought in at that time, including some volunteers to help make those reminder calls. And really, as a leadership team, we had to look at it and determine if that was the best use of volunteer and staff time.
Kristen, what was the biggest learning? So you mentioned you measured, and part of the measuring was greater than 50 hours of time was spent on it. You just identified a number of other things that you wanted to look at, you wanted to approach that were uncovered. What was the biggest surprise, if any, when you measure those 50 hours?
The biggest surprise was probably the amount of capacity that was being spent that could have been redirected to more valuable tasks, like client facing tasks. Really, was that the value for the client at the end of the day? And when we look through a lean lens, that's really where the value is what the consumer or what the client feels. So that was probably the biggest learning for us was, is this the best use of everyone's time? Or is there a way to still get the job done, but be more efficient and more effective in how we do it?
And Katrina, same thing. When you started the measuring and the measuring for the amount of time, energy, and effort that was put towards doing the manual accounts receivable and billing process, when you're mapping that out and looking at the time that's spent on it, what was your biggest learning?
The biggest learning, honestly, was the domino effect it had on each billing cycle afterwards. The later in the month we send out the billing, the later in the month that it was getting busier and busier for our team. And it just kept pushing into the next cycle. Next cycle, clients were experiencing frustration. It's the end of the month. They still haven't gotten their bill. And through that, we learned that it was causing frustration not only internally, but externally to the clients as well.
So I got a question for both you, Kristen, and Katrina. I want to know from the people side, how did this go? So let's say day one, staff are doing their thing, whether it's doing the invoicing or doing the reminder calls. And then all of a sudden we say, we want you to start measuring. We want you to start using this check sheet and marking down the amount of time you do in one of these jobs. How did that resonate with staff? Did they feel like they were being monitored? Did they feel like what's the value to this? Did the leadership team, did they understand what the objective was? Were they able to connect the numbers to decisions we're making? Like, bring us back to that first early days and how we're able to relay this value of measuring and how that's going to bring a discernible improvement to quality. And then how we're able to relay that data to staff so that it had meaning and purpose.
So I think for the, reminder call review, that it was a mixed bag. We had some staff, I think, that believed the reminder calls weren't necessary and that this would help demonstrate that. I think we had people that felt very passionately that we needed to keep them and appreciated the social interaction piece for our clients. But I do definitely believe some staff were a little bit resistant to the tracking. Definitely felt like we were, maybe monitoring because of a performance issue or that it might have punitive results, which we tried to mediate through some of that early lean education to talk about, we're measuring to understand the impacts. We're measuring to understand how much time is invested in this. So we know if our staffing complement actually supports the needs of the organization. We had a lot of early discussion. Sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. But what was important was that the leadership team was all on the same page about why we were measuring it. So at any point, if conversations happened, they would get sort of a unified response and understanding and level of support from the leadership team. To be frank, I don't know that the whole leadership team felt the same way in the beginning because I think we all had varied understandings of quality measurement and what it meant and why we might measure. I think we had a couple on the leadership team that were ready to just abandon the reminder calls because they weren't there when the decision was made initially and maybe didn't understand what brought previous leaders to the decision. So it was definitely a mixed bag, I know, for that project about how people felt. Even in the middle of the process of tracking, we had to do some coaching with staff to say, have you been tracking? Like, what's the barrier to not tracking to really make sure that we were getting fulsome numbers and fulsome understanding? So it really took the buy-in from the frontline staff through education and giving them some of that confidence to understand why we were measuring, that they would be a part of the solution at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to the billing example, when the tracking got involved or first shared with the team, I'd say the team was a little bit defensive. The mailing of invoices, printing out paper was kind of one of those other tasks as assigned. So people were wondering, why are you questioning or trying to track extra support that I'm providing? Is it because you don't think I'm as efficient? Am I not supporting like everyone else is? We aligned the team on, hey, this is our goal. Our goal is to free up this extra time for you. It's not to track how efficient you are at stuffing all these envelopes, but how can we make better use of that time? And once we had reframed that priority as a team, I really saw the team come together and was excited to say, hey, this is how much time it takes me here, or don't forget about this task that I also jump in there as well to complete, so that we could collectively as a team note how much time we were saving, but also resources and cost savings as a team that we were able to save.
So let's not go down the path of solutions yet. I'd like to bring it back in time. And I want to go back to the time where the first phone calls that you're tracking, Kristen, the first bills that you're tracking, Kristen. I want to go back to the first check sheet. And let's say you've been doing it now for days or weeks that you've been doing this tracking. And you just shared to a degree, some staff might have felt defensive. I want to know what some of the early learnings were. So how did you share those learnings with the team? How did you share that with the front line? How did you share it with leadership? Did something come out and strike you out of the gate that was really surprising? And did it kind of make you start thinking that there's another way, that there might be a better way of doing it? And how did staff respond to that as well?
So with the call sheets, we had some anecdotal understanding of what some of the challenges in that task were, but we really didn't understand how frequently, reception and schedulers were on the phone for more than what you would think, 2, 3, 4 minutes to do a reminder call. There was a large number of phone calls that were 10, 15 minutes that were meant to be a check-in, but we deal with an isolated population and sometimes they just need that little bit of extra support. So that was one piece that took a bit of discussion with the staff to understand the needs of the clients. So what is it that's taking the phone call longer? And do we think that they might be appropriate for some other programs like a telephone reassurance phone call rather than that sort of need for socialization happening during the reminder? So that piece was pretty apparent early on, was that, these weren't just quick reminder calls that were taking the 56 hours. It was really the, client's need to communicate and feel connected to the organization. So it really got us thinking about other opportunities for that to happen. One of the ways that we continued to communicate with the teams that were completing this task was sort of those regular touch bases on the one off. So help me understand, Mrs. Smith's phone calls seem to be 15 plus minutes. Like, what are we missing here? Is there something else that the client gets out of these phone calls? It was real time conversations with those completing the task to understand what challenges they were facing, which also gave us insights into some of that staff resistance in the early days. They knew these clients and they knew what their needs were. So that was really important for us to think about future state, was to understand what some of those barriers were and why we might get some of that resistance. That's all information we wouldn't have had if we didn't keep those lines of communication open. We also kept it a very low expectation environment. Just what are you actually doing? It wasn't a comparison. There wasn't your colleague on the next desk is doing these calls in 6 hours a day and you're doing them in 8 hours a day. We really didn't go there. It was just about help us understand what the needs are today and what the barriers are today. Of course, we understood some challenges with our tech setup and our phone system. And so all those sort of logistics pieces came out too. And we really just gave them the space to give us the feedback that they needed during that time.
Great. Katrina?
One big learning piece that came out through the tracking there was how much time, whether it even be after hours, on lunch breaks, was these tasks being supported that we weren't aware of. It was not uncommon to see people on their lunch break stuffing those envelopes, getting that work done. And it wasn't uncommon as well that other tasks were being put off and these tasks were being used as an excuse on why those tasks couldn't be delivered on time.
I really like the comments about this was kind of giving us, let's call it environmental scan to truly understand the scope and scale of the way work's being done today. Kristen, you brought up a comment there about maybe the tech wasn't set up or this wasn't set up. Help us understand, how did you start the initial days of the check sheet analogy? Was it a chalkboard? Was it popsicle sticks? Was it an elaborate form? Was it a piece of paper with a little check sheet? How did you easily start tracking so then you got buy-in from frontline staff, but also got the data that you need to be able to make decisions?
It had to be simple. We knew that early on. We had varying degrees of tech capability, I'll say, or knowledge or interest and investment from our staff, but we still needed the data. So it was a physical piece of paper, which, in a very digital world is not what we wanted. It wasn't really the way we wanted to compile data, but we had to make it accessible. We had to make it logical in order to support that buy-in from the staff. So it was a literal piece of paper where they would just document the interactions with the clients. Took us a little bit of time to compile the data, like I said. Pieces of paper are not ideal, but it was more about getting their support and buy-in. It had to be simple. If it wasn't simple, they wouldn't have done it.
So we used Excel as a tracker for each task as well as the time that it took to complete that task, and use a phone to time how long each task was. You put your phone on your desk and you start the timer and you complete that task. And once it's completed, then we stopped it and shared it there because you didn't realize how much time you're putting in the task. You think, oh, this task will only take me 2 minutes. But when we actually put out the timer and evaluated it, we were 3-4 minutes, doubling some of the task's lengths that we had assumed in the beginning.
If this episode's providing value, if it's helping you think differently or apply something in your own work, consider supporting our mission. You can make a charitable donation at helpinghandsaurelia.ca/podcast. Your support helps us continue doing the work and sharing what we learn.
So let's fast forward. You measured for a little while, whether it was a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and a story started to unfold. And you must have come to some realization of an improvement opportunity that you wanted to explore. So help us understand, what did that look like? So you've been measuring for a little period of time. What story came about? How'd you get staff buy-in? And what did you test? What were the new examples you tested? And then how did you come up with a new way?
Sure. So at the end of our check sheet process, we really understood the amount of time that was being spent. So, as I've said, that 56-ish hours a week of staff time. And we really understood Some clients appreciated those phone calls, some clients struggled with those phone calls. And we really wanted to look at how we could automate reminders for clients, one from a saving staff capacity perspective, but another from a quality and consistency perspective. Everybody, as I mentioned, was sort of completing the task differently. The script was a little different for everybody, but we wanted to make sure that everybody got the same message every time. We also needed something that aligned with our scheduling software. It had to be something that could pull from our existing schedule and make adjustments in real time. Sometimes schedules were adjusted 72 hours or 48 hours before a shift. So we needed something that could pull from our existing schedule. Our operators in the office were manually going to client profiles from a list to look at their schedule for the day before. So we needed a system that could work with us in that aspect. So we started by reaching out to our EMR provider to see if they had any other organizations that were doing this type of work and what some solutions they had known or maybe had experience with before. And luckily got connected to a very impactful, very productive support team there that was able to help us build a new process in our software, pulling from the EMR in real time to make automated reminder phone calls for our clients. Bit of a process to set up. It took several weeks and, the support of our tech team really to look at what was going to work for our clients, what was going to be easy for our staff, but also ensure that quality and consistency. One of the things during our trial that we struggled with was documentation. Is everybody documenting that they made that phone call? So if a client called in and didn't know, we could look back and see, yeah, Kristen made the phone call at 2:00. Just a reminder again, here's your appointment time. We wanted to make sure that all of those sort of quality aspects were covered. So that took a little bit of time to map out and build out with that team, but we were able to utilize our existing EMR infrastructure and add on with an enhancement using the tools that they could offer.
Amazing. Katrina.
So, one thing that we were really looking for was a vendor that we could work closely with that would be able to essentially mass produce what we were doing and be much more efficient than we were able to complete inside the office while maintaining our client confidentiality. We weren't able just to share invoices over email. We needed a secure portal that we could share and upload to and ensure reliability and consistency that clients were going to get their invoices as promised. We had reached out to a couple local vendors within the area, and we established a strong relationship with one just outside of town that we now use on a monthly basis for all our billing, but for other mass billing opportunities, whether it be notices to clients, T4s, and other flyers as well that we do utilize them for on a regular basis.
So I want to just go one step further if we can look at these. So great system improvements and sharing some great system improvements. And Chris, I want to go back to your check sheet example. And you were mentioning that you were spending greater than 50 hours a week doing these manual phone calls. And you talked about creating these always events at the same level of reminder calls would happen all the time. And through your check sheet and through your quality journey, you came up with a reminder call framework that was implemented. So when you come to post launch, what did you learn? I'd like to know about how did staff feel when you implemented the new reminder call system? How did the clients feel about the new automated call reminder system? And what was the biggest learning as you implemented this new system for the organization as a whole?
Sure. So, we had some mixed response to this as a concept when we first said, this is the way we're going to move forward. Of course, we heard, well, Mrs. Smith is hearing impaired, or Mr. Smith has his daughter's phone numbers on the profile, not his. So it took a little bit of understanding some of those situations and assuring the staff that we had a solution that would support the greater good or support the overall purpose of the test. So it wasn't that this was a one size fits everybody solution, but it was really for the masses. And so we did keep a small, I think it was less than 10 clients list of sort of exceptions that we would try to support outside of this framework until we could onboard them in a way that was more personal and appropriate. But overall, our client migration over to this system was successful. Our first couple of weeks were a little rocky, lots of calls back because they didn't understand or the message was a little too fast. So we had to work with the support team to slow the message down. We actually had them repeat the message. So it would repeat twice. When the answering machine picks up, how many seconds before the message starts, like all of those sort of logistics took a little bit of time for us to work through. Clients overall appreciated the purpose. We did, of course, hear some feedback of clients that wanted that personal interaction, but overall, they understood why the decision was made and why we had moved this way. And they understood the support was still there. If you didn't hear it, if you needed more information or you needed to cancel, this is how you reach back out to us and we are here for you. So it took a little bit of that sort of support for the first few weeks and very similar to our staff. So, what do I do if someone calls me and the reminder call isn't working? How do I help them troubleshoot it? Like, we had to work through some of those logistics with our staff. That took a couple of weeks. But overall, I think about by week 4, we were up and running and everybody was comfortable. And we continued to make enhancements to the system as we hear feedback or as new features are released using that connection. We continue to make improvements. What we have seen, though, is a huge decrease in human error in those phone calls. So, what might happen is a staff might call and say your visit's at 2 o'clock when it was actually at 2:15 or it was actually at 4 o'clock because they read the schedule next to it, not the one for that day. Human error happens. So what we did see was a huge decrease in human error. And it gave us the assurity as well. If a client called and said, I missed my ride because your reminder call said 4 o'clock, we knew the system was automated. We knew it was noted and what time was relayed to the client. So, not that it was about proving anyone wrong or about, we just knew we had the confidence that the system was working and it was working the same way for every individual. So we were able to educate clients on how the system works. You'll receive your phone call between these hours of the day. You'll receive a phone call 24 hours before. If your visit was in the evening, we're not going to phone you at 10 p.m. We made an adjustment to the system so that all those calls would happen at a reasonable time for clients, which was one of the early learnings as well. We had people getting phone calls at 6 o'clock in the morning for the day before that weren't always appreciated. But it took those couple of weeks to clear up those bugs. But overall, great response and lots of understanding that this was about shifting staff capacity to make greater good and spend the time with those clients that needed the personal interaction. And everybody really, really understood that.
Katrina, you mentioned a little while ago that some staff were defensive and they might have felt like this was a task they always managed and they always ran with. And I wonder, as you started measuring this process, how that was received from staff that were doing the billing and the invoicing work. And then when you start measuring it, how was that received as you started to learn more through this measuring process?
So as it was received and the overall purpose was shared on why it was gathered, there was a great team buy-in on the objective. Staff loved the idea that, hey, I don't have to spend that extra 20 minutes at the end of my day completing this task that I never wanted to do in the first place. I could use that time better spent elsewhere. So overall, it was exciting. It was kind of a fun little, not a game, but activity that we could all complete together in the office and work together. And we were all striving for the same thing. The better that we could track it, the better we could report it, the more confidence it gave us in our right decision to outsource that component of our billing process.
So let's bring this to a close. We found there was a problem. We measured the problem. We used the check sheet to measure the problem. Then we looked at some variables and implemented a new solution. What I'd like to know is, can you give us a little bit of understanding, like how much time, how much energy, how much effort, how much money it costs to do this? Like, Kristen, you're talking about a new automated reminder system. Like when I hear that, I'm thinking this is like tens of thousands of dollars. Katrina, I'm hearing about you outsourcing some billing model. I'm hearing like another tens of thousands of dollars in options. So give us an understanding, like how much time did it take to come up with the solution? And then how much was the actual solution to do? And going back a couple episodes, we've talked about a number of changes that have been brought forward. And I'm just doing some quick math, but right now I'm hearing hours and hours of freed up time. And whether it's these automated calls, last time we were on a call, Kristen, you talked to me about the intakes and you talked about how intakes went from 48 minutes to 21 minutes. Every time we've been sharing examples, I'm hearing time savings. So I'm wondering, what are we doing with all those time savings now that we've been able to find these few examples that you've shared with us so far?
Sure. So I can speak to the call reminder cost. As I mentioned, we're 50 plus hours of staff time. The build for within our existing system, we're about $2,000 to build out that connection. And then our operating cost, ongoing is around $20 a month, very, very low. So, if you do the math on 56 hours of an administrative staff's wages, there was significant cost savings after, not a whole lot of time of implementation. When we speak about what do we do with the time, I've already mentioned it gave us the time to spend with the clients who really needed that one-on-one interaction. I think one of the biggest celebrations of that found time is we have time to focus on the next project. We have time to focus on the next initiative. We had time to trial other processes and take a look at them where before, you feel too busy to try something new or too busy to reevaluate. It's a difficult pitch sometimes with staff to say we want to try this new way when people are set in their ways, they know this works, whether or not it's efficient. But that was, I think, one of the greatest uses of time, or has been throughout the whole process, is that we have the time now to reflect and measure and look at things that are in place. So that's been really beneficial overall. But also, I would say that those end of the day, the value for the client really sits with the time we can take, the quality time we can take with them, that before we were busy getting on to the next client.
Okay, Katrina, same question. Kristen shared with us the journey and the learning and what that cost and time was. If you can share with us, how did the billing model land from a cost savings, time savings, and implementation?
So I just pulled up our tracker here from 2023, and internally it cost us $624.55 a month to complete that billing process in-house. It was 8.24 hours of administrative time that we were utilizing there. If I look at one of our most recent invoices with that third party, that monthly bill is just under $300, including postage and the whole entire process there. So we are saving over $350 monthly since we have moved forward with that third party.
Great learnings. And I think some really good examples that were shared. And I think one of the takeaways today is the learning was really just starting small. Like it was starting small with one check sheet, measuring phone calls today, or measuring the cost it was and time it was to do a mail out for this month's batch of invoices. And I think these examples were really good to be able to share with everybody, that starting small, we're able to bring that forward and reinvest that time with new opportunities. I guess my final comment for you is, when you look back now, how do you find staff were through that entire process, the initial measuring to the implementation of the new strategy? What new learning did you come from that process that, if you look back, you could have tweaked, you could have revised, you could have done a little differently? Because at the end of the day, this was all about improving confidence, giving more time, giving more capacity, giving more knowledge to be able to have more enjoyment in the work that you do every day. So, closing comments, and as you reflect back, if you had to change one thing in that process, what would you do?
Looking back, if I had to change one thing, I would have shared our objective and goal sooner with the team rather than saying, hey, this is what we want to track. Can you start tracking it? Not having that clear objective at the beginning didn't get the team buy-in that we were looking at initially. But having that team buy-in changed the whole atmosphere while we were tracking. It gave us better results, and there was excitement within the team because we had a collective goal that we were all working on together. So going back, I would have shared that overall objective sooner with the team.
Kristen?
Yeah, I think likewise with our clients. I think, we let clients know with a couple of weeks' notice, but I think there would have been opportunity for us to do some surveying of clients to understand why they prefer a reminder call, or what, if any, value they're getting from a reminder call that would have helped validate for the staff why we were looking at a change, but also to give clients a little bit longer to process that a change may be coming or that a change would be coming. They had a couple of weeks, but there were still many that were caught off guard by the change. So just to minimize the impact to clients and confusion for clients, I think we could have done a better job.
Amazing. Thank you both for sharing today. And we look forward to sharing more examples on a future episode. Till the next time, stay well.
Thanks for listening to the Helping Hands Way, People, Lean, Strategy. If today's episode was useful, you'll find the playbook drop, templates, or tools mentioned linked in the show notes. If you're a nonprofit leader navigating similar challenges, share this episode with someone on your team or in your network. And if you want to keep learning with us, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Real work, real wins, the NFP playbook.